Right now, while you're watching this video, a spiritual boundary has been opened. You didn't feel it, your family didn't notice it, but it happened, and the enemy is already moving through it. Millions of Catholics are living through these 72 hours like ordinary days, checking their phones, eating their meals, putting their kids to bed, completely unaware that the Church marked these days as something else entirely. These are the Lenten Ember Days. And if you've never heard that phrase before, or heard it once and forgot it, then what I'm about to tell you is the most important thing you'll watch all Lent. Padre Pio knew what these days were. He didn't just observe them, he fought through them, physically, spiritually, with sweat on his brow and blood on his hands. He saw what happens in the spiritual world when these 72 hours are ignored. He described it to his spiritual sons with a specific image that should stop you cold. He said the laughter of the enemy echoes through the hallways of homes, empty of prayer. Not a metaphor, a description. If you need a miracle right now for your marriage, your children, your health, your finances, write in the comments right now, Padre Pio, close the doors of my home to evil. By writing that, you are not just engaging with a video, you are making a declaration in the spiritual realm. Heaven hears it. Today, I'm going to show you the 3 battles happening inside your home right now, and exactly how Padre Pio taught us to win each one before the sun goes down on these Ember Days. But first, you need to understand what you're actually dealing with. The word Ember Days comes from the Latin quatuor tempora, the 4 times. 4 moments a year, 1 per season, when the Church plants 3 days like sentinels at the threshold of what is coming. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days the Church Fathers built into the calendar like load-bearing walls, because they understood, when the physical world shifts between seasons, the spiritual world shifts with it. That shift creates vulnerability, and vulnerability left unguarded becomes an open door. These are days of fasting and abstinence, days of deliberate, costly prayer, days of gratitude for the harvests God has given and petition for the ones still to come. They were the traditional days for the ordination of priests, because the Church knew that new spiritual authority should only be raised up when the faithful were already on their knees, interceding. They are the Church's way of consecrating the entire year to God, season by season, before the enemy can claim what hasn't been surrendered to heaven. The Lenten Ember Days are the most serious of all 4. They fall in the shadow of Ash Wednesday, when the whole Church is already called to conversion and penance. They intensify everything Lent demands. They are not a suggestion. They never were. Most Catholics have been handed a version of the faith stripped of its armor. They know the prayers. Some of them go to Mass, but nobody told them about the legal architecture of spiritual warfare. Nobody sat them down and explained that the enemy doesn't attack randomly. He attacks where he has permission, and permission, legal right, is built through neglect. Every unconfessed sin from the past months is an open window. Every act of charity skipped, every fast ignored, every prayer rushed through without a heartbeat of attention. These aren't just personal failures. They are structural weaknesses in the walls of your home. And the Ember Days are the moment when the debt collector arrives to collect on every one of them. Padre Pio called it exactly that, the debt collector. Now there is something I want to put in your hands before we go deeper, because you can't fight a war that lasts months on the strength of a single day. What Padre Pio actually practiced, the complete system he used to maintain spiritual protection over himself and the people he loved, is documented, prayer by prayer, in a guide called The Power of the Rosary with Padre Pio, Miracles, Protection, and Divine Graces. It's not a devotional booklet. It's a training manual. It carries testimonies of verified miracles, Padre Pio's own teachings on how to pray with your whole soul, a 30-day guided structure, and specific prayers for protection, healing, and sealing your home against spiritual attack. It's a small investment in your soul. The link is pinned in the comments. Get it before these Ember Days are over. Now, San Giovanni Rotondo, the night of the Ember Days, and a man who didn't sleep. There was a man in San Giovanni Rotondo who didn't sleep during the Ember Days, not because he chose to stay awake, because they wouldn't let him rest. Padre Pio, Francesco Forgione, the Capuchin friar who carried the wounds of Christ in his hands, feet and side for 50 years, described the Ember Days as a spiritual quarantine. His words, not mine. He told his spiritual sons that during these 3 days, the veil between the visible and invisible world becomes thinner. Not poetic language, a tactical assessment from a man who fought demons the way soldiers fight in trenches, face to face, in the dark, bleeding. His hands were shaking on those nights. Cold sweat ran down his forehead. He would be heard in his cell, groaning, praying, sometimes thrown against the wall. The other friars knew better than to knock. They knew what was happening inside. Padre Pio was absorbing an assault so that others wouldn't have to feel it. He called these days his days of accounts, because that is exactly what they are. Every season that passes leaves a ledger, sins committed and not confessed, prayers promised and never prayed, fasts offered to the stomach instead of to God, small surrenders, a harsh word not taken back, an act of charity postponed until it became an act of nothing. Individually, each one seems minor, but in the spiritual world, they accumulate, they accrue interest. And when the Ember Days arrive, the debt collector comes to audit the house. Padre Pio understood something that most modern Catholics have never been taught, that the enemy doesn't operate randomly. He is not a force of chaos. He is more like a lawyer than a monster. He moves where he has legal right, and legal right is established through open doors, through the specific documented failures of a soul that hasn't been to confession, hasn't fasted, hasn't kept the watch. This is not about guilt. It is about architecture. Your home has a spiritual structure. Every family does. It was built through baptism, through the sacraments, through prayer and sacrifice, and the blood of Christ poured over the threshold. But that structure requires maintenance. It requires the faithful observance of what the Church prescribes, including the Ember Days. When those days pass unobserved, unacknowledged, treated like any other Wednesday and Friday and Saturday, a crack opens. Not a dramatic crack. Not a Hollywood special effect, a quiet one, the kind you don't notice until the foundation starts to shift. Padre Pio saw those cracks in people's lives the moment they walked into his confessional. He would name sins the penitent hadn't mentioned. He would describe afflictions, financial ruin, illness, marital collapse, rebellious children, and trace them back to a specific moment of spiritual neglect. Not always a mortal sin. Sometimes just a pattern of lukewarmness that ran long enough to become a legal opening. He would lean forward, look the person in the eye, and say something that stayed with them for the rest of their lives. You left the key in the door. That is what ignored Ember Days look like from heaven's perspective, not a missed obligation. A key left in the door. The debt collector, patient, methodical, with a long memory, is already on the porch. The question is whether he finds it locked or open when he arrives. There are 3 battles happening inside your home right now. Not metaphors, not spiritual abstractions. 3 active assaults, each one targeting a different dimension of your life. Padre Pio named them. He described them with the precision of a man who had seen them up close, in the dark, with his own eyes. The first one is already in your past. The second one is happening in your living room right now. And the third one is aimed at everything you haven't built yet. Battle 1. The debt collector. This is the battle of the past. Picture a man at his kitchen table on a Tuesday night. Bank statement open in front of him. Numbers that don't add up. He's staring at the page and feeling something he can't name, not just stress, something older and heavier than stress. His wife walks in, asks if he's okay. He says yes. She knows he's lying. She goes back to the bedroom and closes the door. And in the silence that follows, neither of them reaches for the other. That man doesn't know it yet, but what's sitting at that table with him is not a financial problem. It's a receipt. Every sin that went unconfessed over the last season built a file, not a metaphor, a legal document in the spiritual realm. Every act of cruelty toward your spouse that you called honesty. Every time you skipped Mass and told yourself it didn't matter. Every moment you looked at something you shouldn't have and called it harmless. Each one gave the enemy a line item in a ledger with your name on it. The debt collector doesn't come in swinging. He comes in quietly. He arrives through the marriage that starts to feel cold for no apparent reason. Through the financial pressure that appears out of nowhere. Through the illness the doctors keep calling stress. Through the child who stopped talking, really talking. And you can't remember exactly when it happened. You look at these things and see problems. Padre Pio looked at them and saw receipts. He taught his spiritual sons that a small sacrifice during the Ember Days, a genuine fast, a sincere confession, an act of real charity that costs you something, functions as a direct payment against that debt. Not because God is a banker, but because the spiritual law is real and mercy has a mechanism. The sacrifice of these 3 days, offered with a contrite heart, cancels the legal right the enemy holds over your finances, your health, your relationships. A small payment, a massive consequence. Don't let these days end without making it. Battle 2, the thorn hedge. This is the battle of the present. There is a mystical image that Padre Pio returned to again and again when he spoke about the protection of families, the image of a hedge of thorns, not a wall, not a fortress, a living hedge, dense and sharp and grown through prayer, that surrounds the people you love and makes your home spiritually opaque to the enemy. When that hedge is alive and growing, the devil looks at your house and sees nothing useful. He moves on. He finds somewhere easier. When it dies, when prayer goes cold, when the rosary becomes a speed run, when the ember days pass without a fast or a moment of real penance, the hedge goes transparent. Your home doesn't disappear from the enemy's sight. It becomes visible. And what he sees inside, your children, your marriage, your peace, becomes accessible. Padre Pio said it plainly. The silence and the rosary, prayed with the whole heart during these 3 days, are what sharpen the thorns of that protection. Not the length of the prayer, the weight of it, the full attention, the deliberate surrender of distraction and comfort in exchange for something that costs you. Your children are inside that hedge right now. Whether the thorns are sharp or dull depends entirely on what you do in the next few hours. That is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to wake you up. Battle 3, the stolen harvest. This is the battle of the future. This one is the most subtle, and it may be the most devastating. Picture a farmer kneeling in dry soil in early spring, pressing seeds into the ground with calloused fingers. He plants every row with care. He comes back every day. He waits, but he never consecrated the field. He never asked for rain. He never surrendered the harvest to anything beyond his own effort. And when summer comes, when the heat arrives and the ground cracks and the sky stays empty, he doesn't understand why everything he planted is dying. He worked hard. He did everything right. Everything except the one thing that determined whether the season was covered or exposed. That farmer is you. And the ember days are the moment of consecration you skipped. The ember days are tied to the seasons, to the agricultural rhythm of planting and harvest that the Church Fathers embedded into the liturgical calendar. When the faithful prayed and fasted during these days, they were not just doing penance. They were placing their work, their projects, their marriages, their children, everything they were about to build, under heaven's protection before the building began. The enemy understands this better than most Catholics do. His strategy during the Ember Days is not always a frontal attack. Sometimes it's a distraction, a convenient busyness, a mild discouragement that feels like your own voice. Anything to keep you from praying today, because if he can prevent the consecration of this season, everything you plant in the coming months goes into unprotected soil. Your business plans, your marriage renewal, your effort to reconnect with the child who drifted, your hope for healing, all of it exposed. Padre Pio said it with the bluntness of a man who had no patience for comfortable Christianity. Whoever does not sow during the Ember Days will weep at Easter. Read that again, slowly. He wasn't talking about literal crops. He was talking about you, about the harvest you're expecting from a season you never consecrated, about the prayers you'll be praying in desperation in April, that you could have anchored in faith right now. The enemy wants your harvest. He wants to steal it before it grows, and his method is breathtakingly simple. He just needs you to be too busy today, too tired, too skeptical, too modern to believe that 3 days of fasting and prayer could possibly make that kind of difference. Don't give him today. The 3 battles are real, the 3 days are running, and the choice of what to do with them is entirely yours. You've heard the 3 battles. Now I'm going to tell you what to do about them tonight before the sun goes down. Padre Pio was not a man who left people in fear without giving them a weapon. Every warning he issued came with a remedy. Every description of the enemy's strategy came with a countermove. He was a confessor, a spiritual director, a soldier. And soldiers don't just identify the threat, they hand you the rifle. Here is what he recommended for the Ember Days, not complicated, not reserved for mystics or priests, available to you in your home right now. Take holy water. If you don't have any, get some from your parish. Most churches keep a font near the entrance, and it's yours for the taking. Bring it home. Go to the 4 corners of your bedroom, the room where your children sleep, the front door of your house. And at each one, make the sign of the cross slowly, not as a reflex, not as a habit, but as a declaration. Say it out loud if you can, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Mean every word. Then pray the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel. Not quickly, not as background noise while you think about something else. Stand still, face the room, and pray it like a man who believes the enemy is real, because he is. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. That prayer was given to the Church by Pope Leo XIII after a vision so disturbing he could barely speak afterward. He saw the enemy being granted a period of increased power over the world. His response was not a committee meeting, it was a prayer. That prayer, prayed by every priest at the end of every low mass for decades, until it was quietly removed, and most Catholics stopped saying it entirely. The enemy noticed. Start saying it again, tonight, in the corners of your home with holy water during these Ember Days, and you are doing exactly what Padre Pio recommended to the families who came to him desperate, broken, and afraid. The debt collector finds a locked door, the thorn hedge sharpens, the harvest gets covered. It takes 15 minutes. The spiritual consequence lasts a season. Now, I have to be direct with you about something. What I've described today is the emergency response, the immediate action for these 3 days. But the protection Padre Pio built around the people he loved wasn't built in 15 minutes once a season. It was built daily, prayer by prayer, mystery by mystery of the rosary, until the hedge around his spiritual family was so dense and so alive that the enemy couldn't find an entry point anywhere. Think about that man at the kitchen table, the bank statement, the wife behind the closed door. That situation didn't build in 3 days, and it won't be dismantled in 3 days either. What he needs isn't a single video. He needs what Padre Pio practiced every morning of his life, a daily system, a living hedge that never stops growing. That's exactly what the power of the Rosary with Padre Pio, miracles, protection and divine graces gives you. Inside, you'll find his personal teachings on how to pray the Rosary, so it stops being empty repetition and starts being the weapon it was always meant to be. Testimonies of verified miracles from people who prayed exactly as he taught. A 30-day guided structure that builds the habit before the habit builds you. And specific prayers for protection, healing, and the sealing of your home, the complete system, not just the emergency kit. The link is pinned in the comments. A small investment in your soul. The kitchen table can be different. The silence can be broken by something other than dread, but that requires more than these 3 days. It requires what Padre Pio never stopped doing. These Ember Days are almost over. The clock is running. The debt collector is patient, but he is not eternal. You have a window right now to close what was left open, to sharpen what went dull, to consecrate what was left unplanted. Don't let it close without acting. Go get the holy water, pray St. Michael's prayer in the corners of your home, get the Rosary Guide, and write in the comments right now, Padre Pio closed the doors of my home to evil. Not for the algorithm, for the declaration it makes in the spiritual realm. The door is still open. Close it tonight.